Baghdad is not just the capital of Iraq. It is one of those cities where geography, power, faith, trade, scholarship, destruction, and survival all seem to meet in one place. Today, it sits on the banks of the Tigris River in central Iraq, home to roughly 8 million people and forming a huge share of the country's population. It is the seat of government, a financial and commercial center, and a place where the rhythms of everyday life carry the weight of more than 1,000 years of history. But Baghdad's importance cannot be understood only by looking at its modern skyline, traffic, markets, or government buildings. To understand Baghdad, you have to see it as a city that has repeatedly been asked to reinvent itself. It has been an imperial capital, a center of learning, a symbol of cultural brilliance, a victim of conquest, an administrative hub under foreign empires, and a modern capital marked by both devastation and reconstruction. The story of Baghdad begins before Baghdad itself. The site had signs of settlement dating back at least to the Neo-Babylonian period, which means the land around the Tigris already belonged to a much older Mesopotamian world. Rivers mattered enormously in this region. They carried water, food, trade, people, and ideas. When later rulers looked at the area, they were not choosing an empty spot on a map. They were choosing a strategic landscape, shaped by agriculture, movement, and old routes of power. The Tigris gave Baghdad a natural connection to surrounding regions and helped make it suitable for administration and commerce. In the Middle East, cities often rose where water and authority could reinforce each other. Baghdad's location made it possible to command, communicate, and grow. That foundation explains why, when the Abbasids decided to build a new capital, this place could become far more than a settlement. It could become a world city. Baghdad was formally founded in 762 AD by the Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur. This was not a city that slowly drifted into importance by accident. It was a deliberate political project. The Abbasids had come to power over a vast Islamic empire, and they needed a capital that could express their authority and serve the practical needs of rule. Baghdad became that project. It was designed to be a center of administration, a place from which the caliphate could organize its territories, collect knowledge, manage wealth, and project legitimacy. Founding a capital is never only about buildings. It is about declaring where the heart of power will beat. By placing Baghdad at the center of Abbasid ambition, al-Mansur helped create a city that would soon represent one of the most remarkable periods in medieval world history. Baghdad was built to govern, but it became famous for much more than government. During the Abbasid era, Baghdad became one of the great intellectual centers of the world. Its reputation as the center of learning was not just poetic exaggeration. The city attracted scholars, translators, physicians, mathematicians, philosophers, theologians, astronomers, and administrators from different backgrounds. One of the most famous institutions associated with this golden age was the House of Wisdom. It represented a broader culture of translation, inquiry, and preservation, where knowledge from Greek, Persian, Indian, and other traditions could be studied, debated, and expanded. Baghdad's strength was its ability to gather different intellectual currents into one urban environment. This mattered because knowledge did not remain locked inside one language or one community. It moved through manuscripts, libraries, teachers, and patrons. The city became a place where learning was connected to state power, religious discussion, practical science, and cultural prestige. That combination made Baghdad a symbol of the Islamic Golden Age. Baghdad's greatness also came from its diversity. It was a multi-ethnic and multi-religious city, shaped by Muslims, Christians, Jews, and other communities living within a wider imperial framework. The city's later religious landscape still reflects this history. It is home to important mosques and shrines, including Masjid al-Qadamain, Buratha Mosque, the shrine of Abdul Qadir Jilani, and Abu Hanifa Mosque, visited by large numbers of pilgrims. It also has churches, mandis, and synagogues, signs of communities that helped shape its social fabric. Baghdad was once home to a large Jewish community, and it was also visited by Sikh pilgrims from India. This diversity was not always simple or equal, but it was historically significant. It meant Baghdad functioned as a meeting point, where trade, scholarship, worship, and daily urban life brought different traditions into contact. Its identity was never one-dimensional. It was layered, complex, and cosmopolitan. At its height, Baghdad was one of the largest cities in the world. Its population is said to have peaked at more than 1 million during much of the Abbasid period, placing it in the same league as other great global capitals such as Chong'an in China. That scale tells us something important. A city of that size required food systems, markets, crafts, money, roads, institutions, and security. It was not only a palace city for elites. It was an enormous urban organism. Merchants, artisans, scholars, servants, officials, soldiers, religious leaders, and travelers all formed part of its life. Large cities create their own momentum. They pull in talent, wealth, and ambition, and then they produce culture that spreads outward. Baghdad's coffeehouses, later cultural institutions, markets, and scholarly settings belong to this long pattern of urban exchange. Even when political power shifted, the idea of Baghdad as a cultural hub endured because its name had already become attached to learning, refinement, and historical memory. Then came one of the most devastating moments in the history of the city, the Mongol sack of Baghdad in 1258. The Mongol Empire's attack shattered Abbasid power in the city and inflicted enormous destruction. Baghdad was not simply captured, it was broken as an imperial center. The damage went beyond buildings. A city like Baghdad was made of institutions, scholars, libraries, networks of patronage, and inherited prestige. When conquest destroys those systems, recovery is not quick. The fall of Baghdad became a symbolic endpoint for the Abbasid Golden Age, even though history is never as neat as one dramatic event. What matters is that the sack triggered a long decline. The city's population, infrastructure, and intellectual centrality suffered deeply. For centuries afterward, Baghdad remained important, but it no longer occupied the same commanding position in the world. Its story became one of survival after catastrophe, rather than effortless dominance. After 1258, Baghdad entered a long period shaped by plagues, shifting political power, and successive empires. This is crucial because cities do not disappear just because their golden age ends. They continue, but under different pressures. Baghdad's decline was not caused by a single wound alone. Repeated instability made it harder to rebuild lasting prosperity. Trade routes changed, rulers changed, and the city's political significance rose and fell depending on who controlled the region. Later, under Ottoman rule, Baghdad served as the administrative center of Ottoman Iraq, exercising authority over provinces such as Basra, Mosul, and Shiraz. That role gave the city renewed importance, but in a different form. It was no longer the unrivaled capital of a Golden Age caliphate. It became a provincial administrative hub in a larger imperial system. Baghdad remained central, but its centrality had changed. The 20th century brought another transformation. During the First World War and its aftermath, Baghdad became the capital of Mandatory Iraq. Then, with Iraq recognized as an independent monarchy in 1932, the city gradually regained some of its former prominence as a major center of Arab culture. This period matters because modern Baghdad was not merely inheriting an ancient reputation. It was becoming the capital of a new state. That meant ministries, schools, infrastructure, cultural institutions, and national politics increasingly concentrated there. Baghdad became the place where modern Iraqi identity was debated, administered, and displayed. The city's past gave it prestige, but its modern role gave it urgency. It was no longer only a memory of Abbasid brilliance or Ottoman administration. It was the living center of a country trying to define itself in a turbulent region, balancing monarchy, nationalism, modernization, and competing political visions. Under Ba'ath Party rule, Baghdad experienced a period of relative prosperity and growth, but this chapter cannot be separated from the pressures of authoritarian politics and later war. The city expanded, developed infrastructure, and remained Iraq's political and cultural center. Yet the very concentration of power in Baghdad also made it vulnerable when Iraq entered cycles of conflict. The 2003 invasion of Iraq and the Iraq War inflicted severe infrastructural damage and led to a major loss of cultural heritage and historical artifacts. For a city whose identity is deeply tied to memory, manuscripts, monuments, religious sites, and museums, cultural loss is not secondary. It changes how a society connects with its own past. War damages roads and buildings, but it also damages archives, trust, neighborhoods, and continuity. In Baghdad, the modern conflict reopened an old pattern. The city again had to survive the collapse of systems around it. From 2013 to 2017, Baghdad faced renewed violence during the period of insurgency and war against the Islamic State. At one point, it experienced some of the highest rates of terrorist attacks in the world. That fact is essential, but it should not reduce the city to violence alone. For residents, Baghdad was never just a headline. It was home. People continued to work, study, worship, trade, raise families, and maintain routines even under threat. Since the territorial defeat of the Islamic State in Iraq in 2017, attacks have gradually declined and are now rare. That decline has allowed reconstruction projects and efforts at stability to move forward. The important point is not that Baghdad's problems vanished. It is that the city's recent history includes a measurable shift away from the worst intensity of violence, creating space for rebuilding, investment, and ordinary life to become more visible again. Today, Baghdad remains Iraq's largest city and a major engine of the national economy, generating a large share of Iraq's economic activity. It is a political capital, a commercial center, a religious destination, and a regional cultural hub known for its coffeehouses and social life. The city's identity is therefore not trapped in any single century. Abbasid Baghdad, Mongol-ravaged Baghdad, Ottoman Baghdad, Royal Baghdad, Bayati-era Baghdad, war-scarred Baghdad, and rebuilding Baghdad all exist as layers in the same urban story. That is what makes the city so compelling. Baghdad has been repeatedly damaged, but it has not become irrelevant. It has lost libraries, monuments, communities, and stability, yet it continues to matter. Its history is not a straight line from glory to ruin. It is a cycle of creation, collapse, adaptation, and endurance on the banks of the Tigris. Baghdad's real story is not only that it once shone. It is that it is still here. If you found this helpful, please like this video and subscribe for more explainers.